published. So, okay. So welcome to the hot seat with Art Dahlen and Battlefield Addiction, a series where we are inviting political candidates, policymakers, and community influencers into our community to ask questions as we seek answers and solutions pertaining to the fentanyl crisis. Our Battlefield community is not only in this room, but also joining us via Zoom. We've got people from across the country in New Jersey and California, and even in the UK. We have representation from every side of the battle. We have family members and friends of those in long-term recovery, family members and friends of those currently fighting addiction and on the streets, and those who have lost a loved one, both intentional and accidental by fentanyl, as recently as 2 months ago. So we have everybody here tonight, and leading the conversation is Mr. Art Dahlen, the founder and visionary of Battlefield Addiction, owner and creator of Rebuild Recovery. Not only a treatment provider, Art is a highly effective family and recovery coach who has led thousands of family members and individuals through strategic intervention for the past 13 years. His 17 years in active addiction equipped him to lead families and their loved ones out of the woods and into long-term recovery. His work has attracted a substantial following from all walks of life. His straightforward approach and wisdom from his own experience has gained him much respect in the addiction recovery field and continues to gain more and more attention from city officials and organizations that are needing assistance and guidance with this issue. Now, let me tell you that Art and Battlefield Addiction and Rebuild Recovery endorses no political candidates that we may discuss tonight. We are, however, inviting all candidates from all sides into our community forum and letting this issue be talked about in a bipartisan manner. This issue is very serious to all of us, and we must have solutions. We are open to all good solutions, no matter where they come from. So let me introduce and share a little about tonight's guest in our hot seat. Ari Hoffman is the host of the Ari Hoffman Show on Talk Radio 570 KBI. You can catch him every weekday afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. live and streaming. He provides common sense in a sea of insanity with guests from all sides of the political spectrum, just like us. He has been featured on Fox News, Newsmax, 60 Minutes, The Dr. Drew Show, Glenn Beck, the Como News documentary, Seattle is Dying. Ari is also known for his humor and pop culture savvy, so this is surely going to be a fun night. So help me welcome Mr. Ari Hoffman.
Oh, Mom tells the jokes. Don't try. Well, welcome, Ari.
Thank you.
Been years since we've met. We met years ago when Seattle is Dying came out. I saw Ari before he was risen to popularity. So I guess tonight is about, and what we're doing here, pushing a new narrative, the work that we're doing to try to push a new narrative out in the community. And so I want to start with just like hearing your story and where you came from and how you got into this whole thing.
That's probably one of the crazier stories of tonight. I never expected to be in radio. I called my father because I was a theater kid when I got the job in radio at the ripe old age of 40. And I say, hey, Dad, all that time I spent in the theater in high school and college finally paid off. Because I didn't know this was an option. I never had any ambitions for this. Just my brief life story, I grew up in New York. I'm a big New York Mets fan, so I know pain and suffering. Maybe not as much as the Mariners fans, but, it's something I definitely understand. My brother's a Jets and an Islanders fan on top of that, so it's just the worst of the worst. But moved out here because my wife's family's from Seattle. Been out here for 20 years. I did a lot of real estate. That was my main profession, and I also owned an event rental company. It did a lot of those big bounce houses you see at kids' birthday parties. So I was into real estate and inflatable real estate. Those were the two things I did. I mean, it's like inflation. It's got its ups and downs, that kind of business. And what happened was the drug crisis, the homeless crisis, it's not a homeless crisis. And if you disagree with me at any point in anything I say, throw a hand up and tell me why you disagree with me. But it's not a homeless crisis. It's a drug crisis. I'm sure a lot of people in this room know this a whole lot better than I do. And it started affecting me because one of the things I also do is I'm very involved in the Jewish community in Seattle. And the way we make our money, the Jewish community came here in the 1800s for the Alaskan gold rush. Tell all the jokes you want. I've heard them all. So we came here for the Alaskan gold rush, but they didn't find gold, but they found all these other diseases and stuff and started dying. So somebody needed to bury them. So we became a take care of the sick society and a burial society, and that turned into the Jewish community of Seattle. And the way that the synagogue makes its money is from the Jewish cemeteries in Seattle, because unlike other cemeteries, you have to be buried in a Jewish cemetery according to Jewish tradition. So I took a gig on the cemetery board. It was the easiest job in the world. Nobody ever complains. And see, I tell the jokes now.
I know, I'm already not liking this.
I'm the captain now.
Okay, I get it.
And what happens is, one day I got a call from one of the guys who handles the funerals and stuff, and he said, Ari, King 5 wants to talk to somebody from the cemetery board. I go, about what? He goes, well, we got this big homeless problem out at the cemetery. I'm like, anybody think about telling us that? And I said, what's happening? He goes, well, there's prostitution inside the cemetery, and there's drugs being used on the cemetery. They're defecating on the tombstones, you name it. I'm like, how long has this been going on for? Oh, about, 6 months to a year. Nobody bothered telling us. And what happened was a widow had gone to visit her husband's grave, and she couldn't park anywhere because the RVs were everywhere. And then when she finally found a place to park, she goes into the cemetery, and the groundskeepers were cleaning it up every day, so it wasn't like you saw it all the time, but they were seeing it all the time. The groundskeepers had been stuck by needles. The groundskeepers had been attacked. The groundskeepers had found people who OD'd in the cemetery. They always cleaned it up in time for the services, so all people saw was the RVs and stuff. But they started sending me the pictures, and immediately we started dealing with it. So naive Ari Hoffman said, you know what, I'm going to take this to the city. City's going to help me. This is also my entry into politics, right? I'm going to take this to the city, and they got to listen to me because I'm Jewish, and they listen to Jews, right? No. If we ran the world, I want my check, okay? Haven't seen it yet. So I take it to the city, and nobody wanted to listen to me. And I said, no problem, I'm really good at talking. So I'm going to start calling every single media outlet in town. And I start treating it like bingo. Okay, I've been on King 5. When I get on Como? When can I get on Cairo? When can I get on every single media outlet in town? Only 2 media outlets in Seattle did not cover what was going on at the Jewish cemeteries. The Stranger, and we know how awesome they are, and the Seattle Times. Seattle Times did not cover it at all. Every other outlet in town, left, right, center, didn't matter, they all covered it. And it got to the point where Todd Herman, who was a radio host here in Seattle, and now he's still got his podcast, and he broadcasts from Idaho, or hit the high mountains of free America. That's where he broadcasts from. I love Todd Herman. Todd Herman's really the one who got me into this business. I did an interview with him, and he said, the government hates more than anything, Democrats hate more than anything? Guns. And I said, well, actually, I think they hate Jews more than guns. And he said, why not both? So what I did was I hired a bunch of former students of mine. I was very active in Jewish youth stuff, who had served in the Israeli Defense Forces, you're smiling because you were there for all of this, to come and patrol the Jewish cemeteries. And people called the cops on me. They said, Ari Hoffman plans on going and shooting homeless people at the cemeteries. I didn't even own a gun back then. And I definitely wasn't a Republican back then because I didn't have a gun. And when they found out that we were having a Memorial Day event for the kids, and we were putting out flags for the soldiers who had died, and we put it out for Memorial Day, and the kids of the synagogue were coming to do it, I brought out the soldiers. I said I was going to be bringing out these ex-soldiers, and they sent 4 squad cars to watch me. That's when they started sending the police to the cemeteries. It was because that was happening. And it was a media circus, and it just kept going and going, and the story went international. My uncle, who doesn't have a smartphone, he's a very, very religiously observant Jew, doesn't have a smartphone, doesn't have anything. His newspapers are in Yiddish. Yiddish is basically a dead language. It barely exists anymore. And he calls me and he goes, are you okay? I go, I'm fine. He goes, I hear about this thing happening in your cemetery. He assumes it's my backyard. Like he just doesn't know. He wants to know if I was okay. And that started my road to politics. I ran for office. I got creamed by a socialist because it was Seattle.
Well, wasn't it, first there was Seattle is Dying.
Seattle is Dying comes out. So Seattle is Dying comes out. I'm still running the bounce house company. If you watch Seattle is Dying, you'll be like, who's this guy moving the bounce houses? That's me. And this cemetery thing was happening at the same time, and I'm talking to Eric Johnson, and then I started getting more phone calls. Started getting phone calls like people like this guy. And Art may not remember this, but he said something to this. I'm paraphrasing because you just reminded me of this when you were talking about other politicians. You said something like, I hope you win, but I also hope you lose, because then we can get stuff done.
Sounds like me.
It was something along those lines. I met Art, I met Angie, and the truth is, I'm very, very lucky I lost. I thank God every single day I lost, because otherwise I'd be stuck in those meetings all day, banging my head against the table, listening to people like Kashama Sawant talking about how they're going to solve homelessness, about how they're going to solve the drug crisis. And I look around this room, I have no business addressing any of you about the drug crisis. I don't. I lost my uncle to drugs, but I don't know all the details about it because my family doesn't talk about anything. I didn't know my family was Holocaust survivors until I was 40. They don't talk about stuff. But I have no right to tell you guys drug policy. I can tell you what I know doesn't work, but I have no right to tell anybody in this room what I think could work. I can tell you what I've seen and what I know doesn't work. That's it. And Seattle is Dying just blew up. And there's been knockoffs, Denver and Decay. There's been all these different versions of this kind of thing that have gone on, and they call me to talk about this stuff. And that's when people really started paying attention to what was going on in Seattle, because there was this documentary that went super viral. And people started feeling like it was okay to talk about this stuff. And it really changed the whole narrative, changed the whole conversation, where people now felt like it was okay to discuss this kind of stuff. And then 2020 happened. And the pandemic happened, and the riots happened, and my companies were shut down, and I had nothing else to do. So what I started doing, I started trying to find out what was going on around here. So I started filing public disclosure requests to find out who was behind this mess. And then I started writing for it, and I was writing op-eds for an outlet called The Post Millennial, which I still work for. And they called me one day, and they say, Ari, are you still living in Seattle? I said, well, yeah, I write all the Seattle articles for you guys. I still live in Seattle. And they said, there's this autonomous zone thing in Seattle. Can you go cover it for us? And I said, sure, I've got no experience, but I've got a gun now, right? So now I can go cover what's happening in this autonomous zone. What's funny is I think the first time I was there, I was wearing all my Bounce House gear because I was still operating, even though I wasn't supposed to be, in Jay Inslee's paradise here in Washington. And I had a truck filled with bounce houses. I parked it nearby. Little did I know how stupid that was in hindsight. Parked it nearby, went and covered the autonomous zone. And my wife, I come home after doing interviews with whoever I find, and my wife said, show me what you got. I want to see what it's really like. I'm seeing this stuff online. What's it really like? And I show her this one interview. She goes, do you have any idea who you just interviewed? And I said, no, it's some dude in the autonomous zone. She goes, that's the warlord of the autonomous zone you just interviewed. The guy who was handing out the AR-15s out of the trunk of a Tesla? Yeah, him. And I'm like, what's the warlord of the autonomous zone? You can tell how green I was with all that. I had no idea what I was doing. And that interview went viral. The next thing I know, Fox News is calling all the time. Newsmax is calling all the time. And I'm on these stations all the time. And that led me to a career in media, which was fortuitous, because who the hell wants to have giant events during COVID? And my company was wiped out by all the mandates and the restrictions and everything else. So I sold my company and looked for a job in media. And there was a radio host named Kirby Wilbur who was on the air here for years and years. And I was friends with Kirby from running for office. And I said to Kirby one day, he announced he was retiring. I said, who's taking over for you? He goes, well, they're doing a search right now. And I said, well, I'd really love an opportunity. I have a meeting with them. And they said, we like what you do. We like this little podcasting and all the stuff that you do, but you have no radio experience. And I said, have you ever seen the movie Miracle, the one about the USA hockey team in 1980 beating the Russians in the Olympics? And I said, I'm a real dork, and I watch all the behind-the-scenes stuff. And I said, you don't know any of the stars in the movie except for Kurt Russell. You don't know who any of those guys are who are the skaters, because they realized it was easier to teach them to act than to skate. I said, if you think I have the inherent talent to be on the radio, I can learn to push a few buttons. Yeah. Like, that's the easy part. Yeah. And that's what they did, and I have the job now. So it's a really nutty story. It's a really crazy story. It's a lot more detailed than that, but you guys have limited time tonight, so that's the brief summary on that.
So, being a person that in this climate, like, for me, stepping out and having a voice and wanting to say what I believe is true. Really having fear to say what I believe is true. And wondering from your perspective, will it be possible to stay in the middle? Will it be possible to not have to pick a side and say your truth around here?
What's the middle? Who defines the middle? Which is, I'm throwing that back
Well,
to you,
I
not
would,
to evade the
I would
question.
probably say not liked by either side.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
The way it works is if you are an expert on something or have life experience in something, you appeal to somebody. The right is going to like you because you're an expert. The left is going to like you because you have lived experience. The right is going to like you because they think you get things done, but everybody's going to try and use you however they can, whether it's the right or the left, because they're politicians.
So my question specifically is, I don't pick a side on any other issue. But for me on this issue, if I have to pick a side, I have to side with the right. I have to side. And so if I come out and say, I want people held accountable, what will I face?
Well, it's Seattle, or it's, out here outside of Seattle. I know everybody thinks the entire state is Seattle.
A second part to that question is it true for you that at some point you saw accountability equal racism or accountability equal negativity? When did that happen? When did accountability turn into a bad word in your opinion?
Okay, that's a lot there. Let's unpack it a piece at a time. So we'll start with the politics. Who's been running the state for the last 20 years, last 40 years? It hasn't been Republicans. So even if you're not a Republican right now, you know what one side represents and you know what one side has gotten us. We now have a border problem at the northern border. Jonathan Cho, who's sitting here in the front row with the camera, he has covered the problem that people are coming across the northern border. It's so bad right now. The fentanyl crisis has exploded because they keep incentivizing it. In Judaism, we have a term, it's called ahava and yira, which basically means tough love, love and fear. They describe that that's the relationship you're supposed to be having with God and your spouse. Now, it's not to say you're supposed to fear your spouse that way, but the gentlemen in the room know what I'm talking about, right? Don't do the dishes or something like that, But the idea is basically that there has to be the tough love, there has to be the accountability, there has to be the accountability to the people you are involved with, to the being you are involved with. And there's no accountability around here for anything. What do we have right now where you can do all the drugs you want and Seattle will give you a hotel and say, out of sight, out of mind until you die, and then maybe we'll give it to somebody else. That's the problem around here. There's no accountability for anything. At the very least, you need some pushback on these crazy policies. The Republicans in the legislature this year, their only job was to stop the bad policies. And they stopped a bunch of them, but that's not really a way to govern because you're not looking at the actual good policies. What do we do here in Seattle? We give out drug paraphernalia to drug addicts. Do we put alcoholics in bars? Is that what? Does that make sense to anybody? Oh, you're an alcoholic. Let's put you on Cheers.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very, very stupid. So in terms of the politics, you speak your mind. And the people who benefit from it are going to see you as a threat. And the problem is that most people don't realize is that they should be afraid of us. We should not be afraid of our government. Our government should be afraid of us. Why do we have a Second Amendment? Why do we have a First Amendment? We have a Second Amendment to protect the First Amendment. But the issue here is we live in fear of our government. Look at COVID. Look at COVID. How dare you go to a restaurant? And if you don't wear your mask when you go to the bathroom, you might give somebody the Rona. You can sit at your table. Oh, and if it's 11 o'clock at night and you're still in that restaurant, you might die. Because the Rona knows what time it is. 10:59, you're golden. But at 11 o'clock, you might die. So the issue here is that which party did all that to you? Now, if you disagree with me on any of that, I'm more than happy to hear the challenges. But you need to speak up, huh?
What about media? Don't you think it's a biased truth?
So this is a whole different conversation, which I'm more than happy to get into. But the basic summary is, what is the media anymore? The best journalist I know right now is sitting on the floor in front of you with a cell phone. Because he covers the stories that nobody else wants to cover around here. And what's funny to me is stories that he covers, sometimes one of the other outlets will go, crap, it's Cho. How do we get our own version of this story without citing Cho? Is there a way to do this? Because they don't send reporters out in the field anymore. The media just writes press releases. They're not holding anybody accountable. You want a perfect example? When's the last time Kamala Harris did an interview since she became the nominee? 36 days, I think it's been, since she became the nominee, and she hasn't done a serious sit-down interview. not a serious press conference, nothing like that at all. The media of this country is dead. You know who's doing all that? I do not consider myself a journalist. I don't. I consider myself an opinion guy. And yet I'm writing stories every night. I shouldn't be writing stories every night. I should be looking at that and going, that's a good story. I think I'll talk about it on my show today.
So Ari, I want to dial it right back to, but for a guy like me that represents these families in this room, that really I don't want to get involved in the infantile world of blame. I don't want to be in that world. I want to actually get in a world. I want to be in a place where I can make a difference. I want to get in a place where I can talk to people, and is it possible to make sense and have that sense like be driven home, back these people and represent what we all want here. And so I'm trying to understand, because I desperately am trying to understand. I'm trying to understand when everyone in this room would say we want our loved ones in jail rather than dead. We want our loved ones arrested for their crimes so that we can help them get treatment. We want all that kind of thing. I went on Angie and I went on the Dr. Drew show a long time ago, one of his podcasts. So we flew to LA. We went to Pasadena. We went to Dr. Drew's house. We walked into Dr. Drew's house, and this is the problem. And I think it's one of the problems in a nutshell. We walked into Dr. Drew's house. Angie goes, what about Battlefield is different than everything else? And Drew asked that. And we're friends with Bob Forrest. So Bob was there and Drew were there. And Angie flippantly, and I don't know if she remembers this, she said, well, I tried that tough love thing. And she goes, what did you try? He goes, what did you try? And she goes, well, I kicked him out. And Drew immediately corrected her and goes, that's not tough love. And see, that's the misconception. The misconception is that the problem is that we don't, as a country, we don't understand tough love. So most people will say tough love doesn't work. But what they mean by that is kicking people out, putting people in jail for a year. That's what they mean. Don't do that. They're saying, see, because most people either know tough or know love. You see, that's what we have. See, so we don't have this mixture of tough love. Tough love comes when you respect somebody so much that you love them and hold them accountable in a way that you go, listen, dude, you're going to do a couple days in jail and we're going to get you out and get you treatment. And that's for you, man. I don't want you to put in jail. You did this to yourself. So we're going to put you in jail because we have to arrest this thing that's going on with you, and we have to help you. And I think we just don't understand that as a society.
We don't.
So we just understand. And what we see as a society is we see Republicans are tough, and then the Democratic side is love. And, to me, I think love, when you're loving an addict, it becomes something to the effect of codependency at some point.
Well, think about the funding for a minute, right? You can do more when you raise your own funds because then you're accountable to the people who gave you the money. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're accountable to the government, is there government accountability? That's a question. Or is that a form of control? Yeah. The city of Seattle hires as many lawyers as they can from as many law firms, so that way they can't be used to sue Seattle. They do that intentionally. Now, if you look around at a lot of these agencies, they're never going to succeed because if they succeed, they have to shut down, and then that means people aren't making their 6-7-figure salaries anymore. So you need to think about that for a second, is that are we incentivizing the bad behavior, not just in the addicts, not just in the people on the streets, but also the people who are trying to help them? Because we're giving them millions of dollars with no accountability whatsoever. They're living the large life. I know some of them, and I know what their houses look like. And yet, look at what's happening on our streets. Look at the King County Regional Homeless Authority. All the money in the world, it's basically the Seattle Export Company. That's what it is. Export the problem somewhere else. Think of the stuff you can do here. I look at this. I've been in the Department of Emergency Services, right? I've seen the video from inside those places. They're an absolute nightmare. The Downtown Emergency Services in Seattle. It's an absolute nightmare. Why would anybody want to be in these places? These hotels that the city buys the rooms for. The one out in, I think it was Renton, that used to be a Red Lion. They pulled the logo off the building. They didn't want anybody to know it was them anymore. And then I use the bathroom here. Now, I assume you didn't clean up a bathroom of a house where a bunch of dudes live just for me. I assume that's how you live because the place was immaculate. Unless this is something you just do on your talking nights. But I look at that grass. I look at that deck. I look at these walls. My house isn't kept this nicely, and I used to be in construction. Think of the people you're helping here. Think of the people Andrea helps. Think of that kind of stuff. Andrea from We Heart Seattle. Think of these organizations that are doing the good work. Have I ever said, wow, you know, the King County Regional Homeless Authority, those guys got their act together, let me tell you. Wow, just bravo. No, they don't even know. In California, they spent $24 billion and they don't know where it went. $24 billion. They just did an audit and they don't know where $24 billion went, and homelessness went up. Money does not solve everything. In fact, it solves very little.
So Ari, you're in the hot seat, so I'm going to dial it back one more time and I'm going to say it again.
Ari talks too much. We got to zoom in on the answer.
No, I'm not going to say that, but what I'm going to say is my hesitancy in this climate, my hesitancy in this very important issue that I want handled with adult gloves, that I want adults having adult conversations, that I want outcomes, that I want a group of people that can sit in the room and go, let's talk about fucking outcomes and fucking outcomes only. Let's talk about getting people sober. How many people has Washington State got sober through the way that they treat? And if I want to have these adult conversations with adult people, one of the things that I've learned in my span of helping people is the first thing I can do to disqualify myself from those qualifications is to tell people that they're wrong. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of my issue, is that in order for me to say that I'm right in what I think, but you're all wrong in what you think, I disqualify myself from having the conversations with the people that are governing. So I'm wondering, is there a way around that? Is there a way to go, you know what, I want to have conversations with people who are governing that disagree with me, or have you found that they just won't talk to you? That once they disagree with you, you can't have those conversations. So inevitably, you end up being a person that, like every person on every side right now, just blames the other side.
Yes, but is that a bad thing? Because here's the thing. If they say no to you, you're left with doing what you do, and you guys do a great job here. But your job is not to fix Auburn. Your job, and I'm not telling you how to do your job, your job is to fix the kid who's in front of you, or the adult who's in front of you. When I was a youth director for years, I dealt with a lot of kids who had a lot of issues. And they said to me, Ari, you're not a social worker, you're a youth director, right? Mm-hmm. I was trying to be too many things, and unfortunately some kids slipped through the crack. We all know what I'm talking about here. Your job is the person in front of you. How can I help that person? How can I save that person? Or you have friends, and you know they're in the same situation you are. You can open up to them, and you can say, here's what I went through. And sometimes just a friend being there, I'm sure I'm talking to the choir here, right? Sometimes just telling the people what you went through, or you could fight with a politician.
Well, I will disagree with you because for years I said my job was just to help the families in front of me. My job is to help the addicts in front of me. Mm-hmm. That was my job for years. But the state of our community has made it impossible.
Because they're making it hard.
It's infiltrated in every way. I can't have these kids walk to Winco without somebody down there dealing fentanyl. I can't have a family put their loved one in one of my houses because I got to worry every day if they're going to just go to the store, pick up fentanyl and die. Mm-hmm. And I can't even operate with the level of responsibility and staffing that I would have to do to prevent somebody from dying from fentanyl. So in order for me now, and by the way, I think my voice needs to be heard in the community. So I couldn't stand by anymore. And I have to get out there and speak now. And I have to say what we're doing with current policy is insane. Doesn't work with addiction. It's not tough love. It's not love. It's not tough. It's nothing. And what we're doing is completely a codependent sickness that some people have to enable. And I see that. And so, but I also want to say my truth without alienating myself. And I'm
If you're alienating people, they're not actually interested in working with you. A true person who is interested in working with you, I'll give you an example. Jared Newenhouse, over the deputy mayor of Bellevue. We have very honest conversations, and we talk about things that work, we talk about things that don't work. Travis Couture from the Washington State Legislature. We talk about things that work, we talk about things that don't work. Somebody who really wants to make things better and isn't in it just to go up the political ladder will actually want to change things. And if you don't find them in the political world, you will find them in the community. How many people here didn't know each other before you got involved with battlefield addiction? And I'm not saying this to just puff everybody up around here and say, oh, my hosts are doing an amazing job. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to come back anytime. But here's something. How many politicians have said no to you when you asked them to come and even have a meeting?
Well, it depends on what side of the aisle right now. We are getting zero response from anybody that's on the left.
Exactly.
We are not getting any responses from Bob Ferguson. We are not getting any responses from other people that we've reached out to. More so, it's been moderate Democrats have been here, and they will come.
You mentioned Mary Levitt before.
Mara Levitt
Yeah.
came. She's great. Mark Mullet came here. He's great. We love him, and everyone here loved him. And you know, we've had that. But when we reach out, email after email to Bob Ferguson or to anyone, we're not getting even so much as a response.
Do you know what Bob Ferguson told me when the Gaza encampment was at the University of Washington? I emailed the Attorney General's office, not the Ferguson campaign. And I said, hey, you got these Jewish students who are being blocked from going places on campus. They're spray painting the buildings, all this hate, all this anti-Semitism. You guys claim you're, the party of, not allowing hate or anything like that. They told me to have anybody who had a problem at the University of Washington call a hotline that didn't exist yet to report hate crimes. I think it's supposed to come online in 2026. That was what they suggested we do. As much as everybody here goes, I want to solve the world by voting, it's not enough to just vote anymore. Because so many people look at the Seattle Times recommendations, they look at the endorsements, and the Seattle Times, oh my God, I discussed this on my show today. The Seattle Times talked about how much Bob Ferguson sucked and then endorsed him. The Seattle Times talked about how much Chris Rakedahl, who's in charge of the superintendent of public education, how there's a spiraling of the money, I think is the exact wording they used, and how the kids are below standards and everything else, but they endorsed him. No, they didn't. Yes, they did. They did yesterday. Oh. Because their candidate didn't get through. And then yesterday they wrote this whole article about how Chris Rakedahl's not good at this, he's not good at this, he's not good at that, but that other guy, well, he's a little too Republican for us. If you read between the lines, that's exactly what they're saying. Yes, this just happened. So breaking news right here. So the thing is that I'm going to keep hammering this into you guys, putting your faith in politicians. Okay, look, I love Ron DeSantis. Love Ron DeSantis, okay? And at the same time, guy never came on my show. Tried many, many times to get him on my show. It was easier to get Donald Trump on my show than Ron DeSantis.
Did you have Trump on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
On my show, he made a fun comment that went viral. He said that Israel owns Congress. And what he meant to say by that was Israel enjoys vast bipartisan support in the halls of Congress, but he's not really that eloquent. He's a New Yorker. Just saying. So anywho, it went uber viral for that, but most charming guy I've ever spoken to on the phone. I mean, there's a reason that supermodels marry this guy. It's not the money. He is so charming, talking to him on the phone. And I was let down by Ron DeSantis and the fact that I couldn't even get him for a conversation. We used to play Let's Get It On when we would talk about Ron DeSantis as a joke because we liked him so much. Couldn't even get him on the show. If you put your faith in politicians, you will lose every single time. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get policy done around here. So this is a perfect example. You're holding people accountable and you're saying, you want our vote, then you show up and you talk to us.
Yeah.
And hey, Dave Reichert, if you become governor,
What do
you
do?
sat and you're promising this and you didn't do this and you didn't do this and you didn't do this. Want to come back? Otherwise, we're running somebody against you.
Right.
How come you're not running for office?
Because I don't want to sit in those rooms and bash my head against the wall. And,
Exactly. But I'm telling you, okay, so Tara Simmons, probably one of the worst legislatures that we have in Washington State legislature. But she was a convicted felon and she ran and she won. Turned her life around. I mean, now the problem is she's always trying to reduce penalties for people who should be in jail a lot longer. And she's trying to reduce penalties for people who do drive-by shootings and stuff. But at the same time, that's a person who completely turned their life around. And now they're saying the Washington State legislature.
But Ari, let me play like, I mean, who's different? I mean, I understand that if I turn on a conservative talk radio show, but I will hear to the point. I mean, I listen to you and rants, and I go back and forth because that's all that's on in Seattle. There isn't a liberal
That's
alternative.
why our ratings are similar.
That's why there's not a liberal. There's not a liberal alternative to talk radio. Correct? I mean, I don't know if I'm missing.
Air America went bankrupt, I think, 15 years
Yeah,
ago.
so I don't have an alternative, but I listen to you and I listen to rants, and at some point, I turn it off because I've taken too much of what I hear in the political realm. And if you are an American right now and you don't understand that if I turn on Fox, I'm going to hear them blaming Democrats. And if I turn on MSNBC, they're going to be blaming Republicans. And I don't know the last leader with an idea. I don't remember the last person that had an idea and didn't blame the other side, that just stuck to their ideas and came out and did it. And I do want to run. I do want to be in politics. I do want to put my voice out there. I do want to do this thing. And a lot of these guys, they're backing me and they want me to and everything. But I don't want to turn into an infant. I don't want to turn into somebody that just has to blame. And then I'm thinking, I've watched moderates though come into our government and then they need cover from their side. If they don't get that cover from their side, so we're talking about the death threats you face, the death threats that Jonathan faces, the putting his house on. I always thought that the Democrats, I always thought that they were the party of peace. And I thought, wow, if I come out against the Democrats, at least they're not going to. And I'm not saying I'm a conservative either. I'm just saying it just seems if you come out in Seattle against Democratic policy in any way, you might lose your house or your life, or you might be vandalized.
Not everybody has to do what I do and be at the front of the room. There are a lot of people I work with who are behind the scenes. Like, you may know the cast of characters on the Ari Hoffman Show, but nobody gives Mike, my producer, death threats, right? They don't give young Zach death threats. They don't give executive producer Kevin death threats. They don't give Jonah intern death threats. Oh wait, that's my son. Yes, he does get death threats. But the thing is, not everybody has to be at the front of the room. Are you raising money for the organization without necessarily anybody knowing you're doing it? Are you hosting events like this? Are you the person who brought the cookies tonight to make sure an event like this had happened so that somebody else could be inspired to go out there and change something? I say on my show all the time, it's not enough to just vote anymore. You want a candidate to win in Washington? You got to pound the streets and you got to knock on doors. One of the most interesting interviews I did with was the Rising Liberty app. So how many of you, by show of hands, have been out campaigning for any politician ever? Okay, 3 or 4. Most of you would be like, I don't want to spend my nights going to a Republican Party event or a Democrat Party event. Why the hell would I want to do that? But maybe you feel strongly about one of the ballot initiatives, like the ones that are from Let's Go Washington that are going to roll back the insane gas prices. Liberty Rising has created an app where you just download the app and it tells you people nearby, you can go knock on their doors and what to say. You don't have to deal with any party. You don't have to deal with anything else at all because somebody said, hey, this is a barrier to entry. Sorry, didn't mean to bring up low barrier or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, but this is a barrier to entry. How do we get people over the hump for this? The guy created an app so that you can go door to door and just knock on your neighbors. Or here's something. How many of you do not discuss politics at the dinner table anymore because you're worried about offending a relative? Okay. All we do is discuss politics in my house, and that's before I had a job in conservative talk radio, because we talk a lot. And we go back, and I've got relatives who are liberal, I've got relatives who are conservative, and nobody hates each other because it's part of the conversation. When do they make it that we can't talk to each other anymore? So you talk about politicians, and you talk about wanting to hold politicians accountable. I agree, but how many of us are even involved in any of this stuff anymore? If you didn't have the voter guide or the voter recommendation list or Ari Hoffman's endorsement list, would you even know who's running? Do you know how much research I have to do? Here we go. Here's a good one for you. How many of you know the name of the last judge you voted for? Okay.
I voted against Larson. I know I voted against.
So right there, the judges, we got Ann Davidson in CM. Ann Davidson's the city attorney. She wants to prosecute more crimes, a lot more misdemeanors. And these judges keep releasing everybody, no matter what she does. No matter what she does. And let's not forget, that was a really close race. Who was she running against? Nicole Thomas Kennedy. Nicole Thomas Kennedy, who one of her big policy initiatives was she wanted to have a staging area between Seattle and Portland for Antifa. This was a person running for Seattle City Attorney who barely lost. And we don't even know the names of the judges we're voting for right now. That's an example right there of our broken justice system. And who are the ones who keep releasing people again and again and again? I spent 6 hours in jail one time. That was enough for me.
What'd you go to jail for?
Evading pursuit, running two red lights, speeding, suspended license, suspended registration, no insurance on my prom night.
So you are a criminal. I knew it. I knew it. You know? Yeah.
That was a really entertaining evening.
Yeah.
That was before the prom. I was on time. My date was an hour and a half late. But this is the kind of thing where we don't even know who these judges are who are releasing our kids. And I talk to families all the time who come up to me and they are so desperate. There were a lot of you maybe right now where a lot of you were years ago and go, just like you were saying, Ari, I just want my kid put in jail. I don't know where my kid is anymore. I just want him put in jail. You know what? I've got a private security company that I know that I work with that is deputized. And they have private investigator, they have other things. If you guys want your kid put in jail, we can make that happen. But the problem is we can't make them hold him. King County won't keep him. Judges will turn him loose. And the only way to really do that is to upend the system. Now I'm looking at a room of what, 50, 60 people here or something like that. Each of you have a circle of influence of 100 people. You don't realize you have that. Whether it's on social media or whether it's in your own personal life, whether it's a church, whether it's a synagogue, whether it's at your mosque, whatever the case may be, you have a circle of influence of 100 people. How many of them do you ever discuss politics with aside from, oh, it sucks here? Right? Which is what most of us do. But you never discuss the stuff with other people. And so many people just go, well, I'm a Democrat, so D, 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 D. Or I'm a Republican, so R, 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 R. And they assume everything's fine that way. This election cycle, I have something that I feel very, very strongly about, very passionately about, is that I don't want people who support terrorists in our government. So the way I did my endorsements this time was, you stand with Hamas or you stand with America. That's really was my main caveat across the board. And there are 3 or 4 Democrats on my endorsement list. Because even though I disagree with a whole bunch of their other policies, I go, this person hasn't backed a bunch of terrorists. This person actually wants the people who blocked I-5 in jail. This person actually wants the people who blocked SeaTac in jail. And that's me. And you know how many people got mad at me about this on the Republican side of the aisle? People went bonkers. Absolutely. How dare you endorse Adam Smith for Congress? And I said, well, it's him, a Republican nobody ever heard of, who has no chance of winning, or a woman who campaigns on her love of Hamas.
So that brings up another point, Art. Where do you get your information from? Because we and I know, and we talk about it a lot. I mean, a lot of us get our information from an algorithm. A lot of us kind of look at something that a Democrat put out, and then we get more stuff that a Democrat, and they're pretty convincing that they're right. And so you're watching that, and then maybe you get Republican information, and they're convincing that they're right, and then you turn on Como, and you can't really. And so, where does a person that is informed get the truth anymore?
So, I like to argue, and maybe that's my Jewish upbringing, because the Talmud is all rabbis arguing with each other. Books and books and books of rabbis arguing with each other. I don't like the Talmud. It's not my favorite thing to read. It's a harder read. You have to study it for years and years and years and years. But I do like to argue. And what I do is I listen to the other side. I listen to Pod Save America. And I go, where's the BS in this? I turn on MSNBC and CNN. I do all the time. Well, excuse me, why? Because I look for the BS. I want to see the BS. And I go, that doesn't make sense. Now let me Google it. The amount of prep it takes to do my show is insane. I'm always reading because I'm reading from so many different sources. But when you read the Seattle Times endorsement, wait a minute, you hate this guy? You think he's doing a terrible job and you endorsed him? What the hell is wrong with you? I assume that everybody here through your experiences has become more of a human BS detector at this point. And you can see through this kind of stuff when you're reading it. Everybody's got their spin. My show clearly has its spin. You know who's one of the worst is the Associated Press. And the reason I think the Associated Press is one of the worst is because on election night, you can always tell who they were rooting for every single time. Because it won't say the Democrat who lost the election or who won the election or anything like that, but it will say the Trump supporting Republican. It will say the one who supported January 6th. Like, it has nothing to do with what's going on here. And they show themselves as non-biased. You know what I think would be a great debate for Ferguson and Reichert? I think you should pick me and somebody from The Stranger to moderate it. Why do you want somebody who's not biased? No, you want the most biased people. Because I will grill the you-know-what out of Turd Ferguson, and then the other person will grill the you-know-what out of Dave Reichert, and you might actually get the answers to your questions. Because whenever you say we're picking a non-biased model, okay, here's what's going to happen when Trump and Kamala finally face off. Oh, it was ABC. Oh, it was CNN. Oh, it was this network. It was that network. No. Give me Ben Shapiro on one side and Rachel Maddow on the other one, and have them tear apart the two candidates, and it'll be way more fun to watch too. Yeah,
I'm going to dial it back again. I'm going to try
Hoffman
to
keeps wandering.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're talking on a different level on what, I mean, really what I want this to be and what we're doing here is local government making an impact, are stepping out and saying, you know what, we actually forget Democrat, forget Republican, forget Kamala, forget Trump. This is an issue that's killing our loved ones. These are people dying. This is Tyler John's family here. These are people that are dying. It's killing our loved ones. I've lost a lot of people, and we just need this message to get out in a way that we're talking about outcomes, people's life, and we don't care to speak about abortion or and you have your issue with Hamas and Israel. I understand that. I understand your passion, but the passion in this room for the friends that we have lost recently, for the people that are dying from fentanyl, and to see that they say in this state that our government, I got guys in the back of this room. Guys in the back of this room are sober and they're working their ass off. They're working their ass off, man. And they're trying to get a place to live. And they're trying to, they got like $1,000 to spend on rent when their check gets there. And it would be very beneficial if I just told them, guys, forget all this work, forget this sobriety shit, go commit crimes downtown and get yourself a place to stay. Because if you go commit enough crimes downtown, they'll put you into a program that diverts you out of jail and make sure that you can smoke fentanyl and make sure that you have a place to stay. And so this is what we're trying to do, is get our narrative out to say, what about these guys, man?
So start here. How's your relationship with the local police department?
Well, I mean, this is the way that we've met with the police department. We've met with the police department as Battlefield. We meet with the police chief. Almost every police chief that we've met with says the same thing. Our hands are tied. And my response to that always is, why don't you quit? Why don't you quit?
Yes.
Why don't you stand up? It's exactly like you said with the people. When I went to the restaurant and the waiter tells me, hey, pull your mask up as you walk to the table, then you can take it down. And I look at the waiter and I go, you're an idiot. And he goes, it's not me, it's my boss making. And then you go to the restaurant and go, not me, it's the governor. No, when do you stop and say, this is stupid, don't do it? When do you stand up for what you're having people do? And so when do our police chiefs stand up and go, we're not going to take the job in Seattle because we're not backed?
So let me give you an example. We have the Back the Blue stickers here. And I always support our police because oftentimes
that's what we want
to do, which is what we all want to do. When I brought the security guards to the cemetery, that's when all of a sudden the police started showing up. Sometimes that's when you got to start making somebody else do the job. Now, I think about the organizations like yours that I've worked with. Worked with Andrea. I've worked with Union Gospel Mission a little bit. I've worked with the Millionaires Club, which isn't called the Millionaires Club anymore.
Right.
And I don't know what your different relationship is with these different groups, but when you start forging alliances with these different groups, you may go, okay, we handle the addiction part, but we don't have, for example, the housing part, or we don't have the job part. By the way, your coffee shop, is that thing still running?
No.
Oh,
COVID shut it.
The COVID shut it down. That was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
That was an absolutely brilliant idea. But something like the Millionaires Club, I used to hire people from the Millionaires Club to do the bounce house company. They would work for me all the time, and I'd be dropping guys off at the homeless shelter after a day of work. And we got a few people back on their feet afterwards just by hauling bounce houses. So who can you team up with? Who can you form alliances with? Andrea is sitting right here. And I don't know what the crossover is between Seattle and Auburn. I don't know how that works. I don't know what your dynamic is. But I bet the two of you have a whole lot more in common than
me
you
and Andrea,
disagree
yeah,
with.
Well, me and Andrea disagree or agree on everything almost down the aisle. But
So here's what I'm saying is that, okay, the police can't do what they can't do, right? But when you start working with different organizations like that, and I know you do, and I know you do, and I know you work with the ones that you can, stop seeing it as it's me against the world. Because you're one guy in a state of 8 million people, and how many of them are addicted to fentanyl right now? Those numbers are only going up. You need to build more and more alliances so you can build an army. I'm not saying that insurrectionist style. Get canceled all of a sudden. I'm an insurrectionist building an army. I'm not saying that, but you need more people working on your side. And this is a great start. Because what you need is you need more people coming to your cause so you can say to the police chief, no, we say you need to do this. We put that guy in power who's telling you not to do this, and we're going to boot his ass out in November. And I know it seems like an uphill battle right now, but you got to start very, very local and very, very small. Who's your city council member here?
Well, Dana's the mayor. I don't know all the city council people, but see,
Most people don't.
Yeah, we have an operator out of Kent,
Right.
very large.
But most people don't. Most people have no idea.
Well, the problem with going that local is that some cities are good and some cities are bad right now. And that if you go into a city like Covington or you'll see a nice area. If you go to Maple Valley, you'll see nice. If you go even downtown Kent, Dana, the mayor of Kent, has done a tremendous job. She's done really well, Dana Ralph. And so Kent is like not an area of focus for us, although there is, it gets to the point where what we have to do is, I guess the whole point of this is we're here to get this narrative out that all these family members that our program equals responsibility and accountability, that what it means to get sober for a human being and what our local government robs people of, which is any achievement and responsibility. And, we're just trying to flip this narrative because I think that it doesn't matter anymore how they twist policy. It doesn't matter anymore the laws, because they seem to have this narrative that whatever law we put out there, they can just twist it and still protect the drug addict.
So here's an example. What if you took $1,000? $1,000.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
before Ari starts talking, we need money. So battlefield auction, I'm going to get this in. We're doing two things right now. Sorry, a little plug.
This is perfectly.
We're going to plug Ari's show too. But the auction is coming up November 9th. We need two things. We need a bunch of stuff. We need sponsors that'll buy tables. So if you're a business owner, we need you to buy a table and sponsor the auction. Angie can send out a list of sponsorship ideas. We're also taking to local businesses right now. We've got our sticker that we're putting on cups at a bunch of coffee places for the month of September, which is Recovery Month. So we're putting that out there. And like I said, I think Ari's telling us already what we knew. We need to raise money from this community to get our voice out there, to bring ourselves down to Seattle, to put pressure on these politicians, to make them do their jobs. And that's what we need to raise and give this organization power.
So here's an example. I'll just do this right now and maybe we'll get you a few donations here. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. That's awesome. If it starts raining, it's like Safeco Field. Yeah. So think about this for a second. If you take $1,000 and you interview everybody's kids here who are on the road to recovery, 90 seconds, 60 seconds to 90 seconds. I'm happy I went to jail because.
So we need Eric Johnson for that.
Sorry?
We need Eric Johnson. Can you get us Eric?
What about this guy?
Or David?
Yeah,
I forgot.
Jonathan. What about Jonathan?
Jonathan.
Yeah, Eric Johnson's retired. How about Jonathan Cho right here? You do 60 to 90 second videos. I'm glad I went to jail because. And what do you need the $1,000 for? Jonathan will help you out with this, no problem. But what do you need the $1,000 for? Because you're going to run Facebook ads. I'm glad I went to jail because. And you're going to put flyers behind it. And you're going to have a whole campaign. I'm glad I went to jail because.
So I gave this, me and Andrew have been working on this idea for about 3 weeks.
Hang on, I'm going to give you the flip side of it.
Okay.
Not done yet. He didn't go to jail. And here's what
Right.
happened.
Right.
And that's your flip side of it.
Right.
Tough love.
Yeah.
But the two things go together. And that campaign could cost you $1,000 and you could reach 500,000 households in your area.
And then we go on the Ari Hoffman Show. We tell about our campaign.
Done.
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 Um,
So little things like that. And I bet you right now in this room, I could probably get you 10 people in this room to give you $100 to do this campaign.
Mhm.
I'm not going to put anybody on this. But afterwards, you go talk to Art. Okay. You could
Jeff
do that
Peterson will pay for
right
it.
now.
He'll pay for the whole thing.
You could do that right now where you put a few bucks behind that. That's
Jeff
$1,000.
just sold his car. He'll pay for it.
What kind of car was it? Yeah. So this is the kind of stuff that, guys, simple things like that you probably didn't think of, because a lot of the times it's marketing.
No, listen. That's the rub, is that we have thought about it.
Mhm.
And here's our concern. We thought the whole campaign, an accountability campaign, me and Andrew have been talking about it for weeks, kicking it off. Our concern is if I give it to Jonathan and Jonathan does his story and it gets drowned out by the mainstream media.
Which it will.
Yeah.
But
And they go, not only does that campaign suck, they're going to say Art is a mega loving, Battlefield's a mega loving, Trump loving organization.
they're going to say that. They're going to say that anyway.
Yeah.
They're going to say that anyway.
Yeah.
They are now calling RFK Jr. a MAGA loving Tulsi Gabbard, a MAGA loving whatever.
Yeah.
If you disagree with them in the slightest bit, you're a MAGA loving whatever. Look how easy something like this is. And you think it's going to get drowned out? You are not after the big things. You're not running a race. What you're trying to say right now is you are laying the foundation for the next race. This is what the Democrats are very good at. They play the long game. Republicans go, what is the crisis I have to put out the fire of right now in this very moment? And I'm so distracted putting out that crisis or putting out that fire that I don't have time to think the long game. Democrat, you think Kishama Sawant took control of Seattle in 1 year? In one election cycle? The socialists took control of Democrat Party after Democrat Party after Democrat Party in every single district until they got all the socialists. This is how it went.
Okay. Challenge you
Go.
right now. All right. You say,
I don't have $1,000 on it.
okay.
Okay.
Well, they've already stole the rims off your Charger, so it's they know they're not going to jail.
Very good. Very good.
So, I already had them do that.
Fantastic. Try to keep me here for longer.
Yeah, I got guys
Yeah.
pretty loyal that don't have much to lose. So, okay, my question to you is then, in this climate and this thing, you said something earlier. You said, and I got to challenge everyone, man, because you said, well, I'm glad I didn't get elected because I've done so much more. Well, from our perspective or from your perspective, what does what you do? What is it when you say more? What we see is more progressive policies or more things going on. How have you been able to stop that? And what have you done that you think is successful by taking that platform?
Great question. Was it Babe Ruth? Somebody, one of the sports guys, said something about, you miss 100% of the swings you don't take,
Yeah.
right? Then there's the one about, the basketball one, and everybody's got one for every sport, something like that. This guy here, this guy right here. I love this guy. And we were friends together, and Como News fired him. And we had a meeting afterwards, and I go, you come on my show anytime you want. Does that mean that I change the world or anything like that? No, but I always get a smile on my face when I see a Jonathan Show story. Because so many other people said, we don't want this guy in the media anymore. And am I saying that because I think that Jonathan Show owes his career to me? No, he would have had a career without me.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at Jonathan Show and I go, I am so happy I said, this is a guy who's a journalist. Free speech. Something like that. Andrea.
Yeah.
I went to a thing that Andrea did way back when. Safe Seattle had that event. Remember that? Safe Seattle had this event years ago. And I'm like, I wonder if this lady's actually going to get anything done. Now I call her when I got an issue at the cemetery. Call Andrea. She gets it done.
Right.
Some politicians, I've destroyed their careers. And some politicians, thankfully, I've gotten them elected, and hopefully they're doing some good. But the good that I look at myself as doing is that if I was on the Seattle City Council, I wouldn't be able to do the things I do for my synagogue.
You wouldn't be able to give people a platform either.
I wouldn't be able to give them a platform, but I wouldn't be able to do the things I do in my community with the nonprofits I work with,
Right.
where I think I have a pretty decent impact. I mean, I worked with teenagers for 20 years. Almost 20 years I worked with teenagers. And nothing can replace that. That's the thing I'm proudest of. When I die, I don't want them to go, Ari Hoffman, hell of a radio host. Best radio host Washington State has ever seen.
Funniest.
Funniest, except for Art. Yeah. I went to a funeral one time. So there's a thing you do after a Jewish funeral called Shiva, where you sit around for 7 days and people come and visit you. It's like a wake every day. And I went to one of a lawyer, and all they could do was talk about what a great lawyer he was. His own kids sitting around just going, what a great lawyer, what a great lawyer. If I do that, I've done life wrong. So am I proud of the stuff I've done where I've given people a voice, or I've given people a platform, or I've got people elected, or I've gotten people not elected? Absolutely. Like, one of the ones I'm proudest, I made sure she didn't get elected. This woman decides she's going to run for office for King County Council. And I did one Google search, and her criminal record came up where she walked onto a bus filled with middle schoolers and threatened to blow it up. Nobody in the media even Googled her. And I'm proud as peaches that she didn't get elected. Because as soon as I got a copy of that video of the bus, that was the end of that. That was the end of that campaign. But at the end of the day, what am I more proud of? The nonprofits I work with. I'm more proud of the money I raise for Jewish causes or whatever else it is. And when people call me, like Battlefield Addiction, and say, hey, Ari, can you MC our event as long as it's not on a Friday night or a Saturday night? Abso-freaking-lutely. That is the stuff that now my platform has given me the opportunity that people call me and say, hey, Ari, can you MC our fundraising event?
Yeah.
So that we can go do the good work in the community. But also that people can come to me. And how many of you tonight found out about an app you can go now canvas for that you didn't know existed before? Right? I just spread information. Whether you agree with my opinion, whether you disagree with my opinion, I spread information. But I am more proud of the work I do right now. Somebody else in the industry said to me, I don't do any gig for 10 grand or for less than 10 grand. How much should I charge you tonight?
15,000 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, man. If I was doing that, I'd have a nicer jacket on, not an Amazon special. That I got right now.
Pay him later.
Yeah, exactly. Installments from your dinner that you do later from your auction.
Yeah.
But when people want me to come talk, especially come fundraise for a thing, if you're fundraising for a political party, I charge you. Right? That's what I do. If you're fundraising to help get kids off the street, and my name can get a few more people in the door, maybe to help you fundraise a few more bucks, tell me when, as long as it's not on a Friday night or a Saturday. I'm available 24/6. So whenever that is, what did I do? Yeah, I don't think it's a lot in the scheme of things, but I'm more proud of the things I do that have nothing to do with government than the things I do that have something to do with government, because that changes the world. How many of you here have anything to do with your governments aside from your interaction with the law? 1. Okay. 2. Right? That's it. That's it. And how much good work have you guys done? Look around at this place. This place is magnificent. This place is a palace, and this place is changing lives. You want politicians to listen to you? Then you grow this army. And the next time you're having one of these events with Art, you call a friend who either has money or may have some political influence or something, and say, can you come with me to this event? I never ask you for anything. I want you to hear from, because it shouldn't just be me in the hot seat. It shouldn't just be Reichert in the hot seat. Show off your success. You know what you never hear the organizations in Washington doing? Not you guys.
Yeah.
You know what you never hear the big money ones doing? I never see their success.
They don't have any.
Right, because I got to go looking for them, and then I do public disclosures, and then I find out that California spent $24 billion to make the homeless problem worse. When City of Seattle declared a homeless crisis, would you like to know how many people they declared it with on the streets? 3,000. 3,000. Now they're not even sure what the number is. They do the point in time count. They don't know.
Well, I think it's honestly worse than that. I think they want the number to be bigger than it is.
There's that too. But I think
that's how that.
I think they're underestimating it.
Well,
Drastically, because I think that their counts aren't accurate even on top of that. Because I go down the street, I drive in downtown Seattle every single day to my studio. Every single day I see Seattle squalor, and I don't see the same person twice. I've never seen the same person twice. I see the same tents sitting around, but I've never seen the same person twice. So think about that tremendous amount of waste of money, and then think here, you're a nonprofit, you're a small nonprofit, and every single dollar you earn, it's not like you're serving sushi back there.
Mm.
You're not serving a barbecue back there. It's coffee and it's cookies.
Well, I don't serve. I eat the good stuff. I
Well,
serve the
exactly. I
coffee.
serve the other stuff. But if I had come here and seen you guys serving sushi, I would have been supremely disappointed. Because then I would have been like, well, now I know where your money goes.
Yeah.
There's so
It's actually though about diet. The better the diet, the better morale, the better people get along. Diet's important.
well, when you're doing a fundraiser, look, I mean, when I do a fundraiser, the bar is open all night, so I can get people as wasted as possible, so they give me as much money. I'm not, encouraging that. But for example, I make sure I have the best food. I'm doing a fundraiser this weekend, which is Meat Fest in Hebrew, right? Why? Because people will give me money if I get them full stomachs, right? There's all kinds of barbecue you could possibly imagine at this thing.
Meat Fest.
Meat Fest, so it's called Busset
Sounded like
Fest,
those
but-
weird parties the guys used to have in college.
Yes. I went to an all boys college.
Yeah,
That's a whole different thing.
Okay, I want to take some time for questions for Ari. So I want to
Sure.
make sure that anyone out here has, especially if you don't like
And
him.
I'll put this out here also. If you disagree with me, please, I want you to ask your question first.
Yeah,
If you have a Jewish question, I've heard them all, so don't think it's rude to ask. Okay, you can ask me any question you want on politics, on sports, on any of this kind of stuff. May not know the sports answers unless it's the math. Yes.
So, in Tacoma, we have an organization that's called City Club.
Mhm.
And on it, there's debates and there's panel discussions. Seattle had a speaker series that was similar.
Yes.
What's the possibility of you hosting a, panel discussion and you inviting in some of the leaders to, and it could be a mutual, being led by both you and someone from the stranger, but we could all help organize this. And, but it could happen. It could happen to have this bipartisan discussion and holding people accountable. And we can all help make that happen.
So I will give you my phone number afterwards. I have a stack of cards right here. Oops, there we go. I have a stack of cards right here. And we will make that happen.
Yeah.
Look how easy that was.
Me and Andrea on one side.
The best way to get a hold of me is always email, because that's my to-do list. Whereas if you call me, my phone's on silent because I'm either talking to groups or I'm on the radio. So the reason my email's on that card is not because I blow people off, but it's the only thing I check regularly.
He texted me the other day. I said, "Don't text me between 3 and 6. I'm listening to the Ari Hoffman Show."
Yes. That's it. I've answered
Denise.
every single question. Yes.
Well, I just became aware of something called Drinks in the Driveway, and it's where the Kent mayor comes to a neighborhood, and there's an event Thursday night in my neighborhood to bring, issues in front of the mayor and whoever she brings. But I need almost, I don't know, from you, Art, or somebody, a bulleted list that says this is exactly what we need and these are the steps that need to be taken, because I'm a newbie. As yes, I've lived the experience, but to bring it down so that it can be digested by somebody else, I need help.
Okay.
So that's actually something where you guys could get together and have an event where you guys go, what do we know doesn't work? All right. And you'll come up with a massive, massive list. These things don't work. It's going to be a lot harder to come up with the things that do work, but you have some measure of success here.
But we
And you go,
we do know what works.
you do know what works, but you say, these things work, but sit down and formalize it and say, this is what we believe works. This is our thesis. This is our mission statement. This is what we stand behind here at Battlefield Addiction. This is what we stand behind here in Auburn because we know this works. Will you sign on to it? Is this something you will sign on to? This is one night of your lives, guys.
Here's the deal. There's two things I want to say real quick, and just so Ari hears it, and Jonathan hears it, and anyone that's new that hears it. I have a real theory on drug addiction, really the root cause of drug addiction, and I've done a lot of research, and I've met a lot of drug addicts, and I've scoured, and I've found out what it has or what it's about, and I've come to the conclusion that drug addiction is caused by drugs.
That's deep.
It's the one tie that binds every drug addict, drugs.
That's deep.
Um,
Mhm.
I've never seen a drug addict that didn't do drugs. So
That
there's
was the
a,
craziest. King County did this, and it drove me bonkers when they were considering safe injection sites. They had on it the people who would be eligible to go, and it said first-time drug users.
that's making a good first time.
It said that. I have the documents. It said first-time users.
Well, I said that because I said that, Ari, because I believe that as long as drugs like fentanyl are here, we're gonna have fentanyl addicts.
Mhm.
And I think that, well, it's a misnomer from all, it's you know, something that's put out there is that at the cause of this is that drug addicts are these baby birds that were traumatized that, and we don't seem to see it that way. We don't really experience it that way. We experience more entitlement, meaning a supply of drugs. And what we deal with here, and you said what works for battlefield addiction? Well, what if we can save it, we can get people off drugs. And that one of the things that we know is recovery is responsibility.
Mhm.
So what I know about anybody that's recovering is they go from no responsibility to some responsibility to a little more responsibility to a full life of responsibility. And that is recovery. And so that's what we actually
Jordan
value.
Pearson. Anybody here ever hear of him? Jordan Pearson. What's the first thing he tells you to do when you're trying to get your life back together? Clean up your room.
Mhm.
And then you graduate up to something
And
bigger.
that's exactly the theory here. So
Mhm.
when we see that there is a lack of accountability and a lack of responsibility, we definitely know that doesn't work.
Right. I mean, I use this example all the time. You're driving in a parking lot and you see a father holding a kid by the scruff of the neck and screaming at him. Now, in our society today, you're going to assume he's abusing the kid, he's beating the kid. What you don't know is that kid just ran into traffic in front of a car and he had grabbed that kid back.
Hmm.
And people go, oh, what you're saying is harsh. Ari, I don't like what you're saying. It's mean. I go, oh, did I hurt your feelings?
Mhm.
I'm sorry about that. Right? No, I don't really care because I say the truth as I know it. I say the truth as I believe it. And something that the audience has said that resonates with them is we never think Ari's full of BS because I don't do stories that don't interest me. Why would I talk? We believe in Judaism. You only get a certain number of words in your life. Why would I waste them on something I think is stupid? Do I think there are stupid people? Yes. Do I think there are stupid topics I cover, but I want to show you the stupidity of them so we can change things and turn things around? And look at Seattle. Do I think things are perfect there right now? But look what we did in the last election cycle where we got more moderate city council. Baby steps forward, little tiny baby steps.
What about, so you're on every day, you do a lot of different features. What would it take to do a feature about Battlefield?
When do you want to do it?
Where it's, well, I talk about art. But what I'm saying is, and that could cover a lot of things, that could cover what Battlefield does, that could be a way to be able to discuss some of these different things for maybe parents to tell some of their stories for people to, but to not only that, but to to get some of our voices heard in a lot of different aspects and ways. I mean, I've watched multitude of episodes where they've been featured on King 5 and different things like that.
Mhm.
But 3 hours is a good, I mean, not that it has to be a full 3 hours, but I mean, it's a good chunk of time to.
Well, we on this room and we in our world, we do have those. You don't have to, you can throw a rock and hit somebody that's a success story.
So
We don't have, we don't have any.
here's what you gotta think about it. People listen to my show because they want their politics with humor or they want stories. They don't want to just talk about addiction. They want to hear the story of somebody who got out. Andrew, have I ever said no to an interview anytime you asked me?
always have your ear, Ari. We deeply appreciate it.
Anytime Andrea says she wants to come on the show, I'm like, sure, hang on. Maybe this time, or we'll find a time. We always make it work. Sometimes I call Andrea and say, want to come on the show? So what I'm saying is, bring me the stories and let's tell them.
We'll put it together.
One of the beauties of Art and Angie and of Battlefield is that it is outside the box.
Mhm.
And I can say that because after 11 treatment centers, it was word of mouth, and I was told, please just go talk to them. And I was not ready to think outside the box
Mhm.
until I sat in that basement right over there and thought, what the hell? It's been 11 treatment centers. Let's see what we could do. and Art had a battle. But my son he's a success story. And he's a success story because this man never gave up one time. Through many, many obstacles along the way. Didn't say you used, you're out the door. See ya, come back after 30 days.
I also didn't say you can stay here. No.
No. It's the outside the box, and I think there are so many families that need to understand that there are more than one avenue.
Well, Ari, this thing.
And so
So what I'm telling you is, when's your son coming on my show?
Parker Olson on the Ari Hoffman Show.
Oh, yeah, we do. So, but here's the other thing you need to think about.
if Art asks him, he won't do it if it's not.
Totally get it. Totally get it. But I'll tell you something else you need to think about. Now I gave you an advertising campaign, which you got to do. And you're going to give me these stories, and I'm going to feature these stories, and we'll do that. But the problem with Seattle is dying. There's one major problem with Seattle is dying. Everybody started doing the same thing afterwards. And now they barely cover this stuff anymore. Unless it's so outlandish, like what happened with the 80-year-old woman who got carjacked the other day. There's the dog walker who the guy ran her over with the car.
And the 13-year-old girl.
The 13-year-old girl. And now they don't cover smaller stuff anymore. So what I'll let you finish. I want to get this point in real fast. Is that, like we talk about our Democrat friends, but it's what's after that. So I gave you one advertising campaign and you go, okay, this is for 90 days, or this is for 6 months, or this is for a year, or I'm featuring these guys on my show, let's say once a week, or whatever the case may be, whatever we do. Okay, what's after that? Because segments on my show get stale. The reason it doesn't always get stale is because we have the news. What else? Today, I literally had this conversation with my producer today. I said, I'm tired of talking about whether or not Kamala Harris is going to accept the debate. It's been days of this. I'm tired of discussing that Kamala Harris is hiding from the media. It's been 36 days of this. I need something else to discuss. And I just opened up and I started looking for other stuff. And I'm like, oh, Israeli hostage got rescued today. Cool, change of pace, let's do that. But what you need to do with these stories is they're gonna start to sound the same, even though every single one is unique after a while. So now it goes, okay, we showed you the problem. Now we show you the solutions. We show you what doesn't work. These all have to be their own campaigns. And that keeps your narrative fresh every single time. Pepsi doesn't do the same ad for 30 years. Pepsi got Britney Spears, and they got Michael Jackson, and they got whatever to sell their product. It always has to be, what's the next thing we're selling? And you guys are selling life. You're selling life, and nobody's story is unique, but you got to find a way to put a new spin on it every single time so people don't go Battlefield.
I did a King 5 news story 5 years ago. And I didn't tell it. It was a spur of the moment thing. Jake Wittenberg was one of my customers at Starbucks. Mm-hmm. And as I came through in the morning, I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing the opiate crisis. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I started crying. He says, will you meet me after you get off work? I said, yes. He brought his camera. Raw as shit. I told nobody. Nobody. Not my husband, nobody till the day it aired. And I provided footage. Oh, that's the one time my son was pissed. He didn't show him from here up, but if you knew, you knew. And I was like, dude, anybody that knows you already knows, right? 5 years later, every so often I go back to that YouTube video and I look, there are still posts on the positive and, give us an update or how's it, where it still makes an.
Did you put on that? I would say Parker Price. I mean, Jesus, get it out. Get the real story out.
People
Yeah.
find it, when people find it on Jake's YouTube channel, they still make comments on how it still makes, and that's what made me think of doing something like this. Where, the impact can be, it's not even just the impact today or next month, but the impact that can continue as time goes by and people that find it as it goes,
Which is great.
which is,
It's all a great idea.
Chad, you have some.
Yeah, Ari, what's the breadth of the stories that you're looking for, and how far outside Seattle do you go?
I'll go anywhere. I went to the RNC in Milwaukee, that was fun. I went to the injection sites in Vancouver. I filmed an undercover video when I was running for office, which was called Injected. It's on YouTube. It's 15 minutes long. Lori shake her head. She's seen it before. You can see the undercover audio we got from the injection sites in Vancouver, BC, where they admit that they don't offer treatment, where they admit that people have died at the facility, where they admit that people have overdosed multiple times, sometimes 8 times in a day at the facility, and basically that these things are accomplishing absolutely nothing. I will go anywhere for a story, but like I said, the thing you guys got to think about, you bring me all these stories, this is going to be great, there's going to be a flood of stories, or there's going to be a lot of reception on the social media. How do you
Do you ever get involved in church politics?
church politics? I got enough problems with my own religion, but especially these days. But what do you mean by church politics?
Well, you're Jewish. Do you ever get involved in political stories about, for example, the Catholic Church?
Yeah, but it's kind of outside my wheelhouse. But for example, there are some churches here that are enabling this behavior. And that's something I'm more than happy to talk about. Meaning I don't want to discuss something that's outside my wheelhouse. So if you tell me there's some scandal in our church involving how the pastor's doing this or whatever, I will not know what I'm talking about. Will not know. But if you say to me, Ari, this church, like the one at in Ballard, the one right next to Ballard Commons, right? Which was the one that was enabling a whole bunch of bad behavior over there in Ballard Commons. Oh, sure, I'll do that story 10 times a day.
I'm thinking like the Holy Rosary Church in Tacoma that people are trying to save, and the Archdiocese is trying to destroy it. Is that something that's
I'm not sure what you mean by save or destroy.
save, keep it, restore it?
Or restore the building.
Right.
Bring it to me, let's check it out. Or get your wife's got my card, right? Bring it over.
Right here.
So I call myself a third party survivor of fentanyl crisis. My sister's been an active addict for over 20 years. I got custody of my daughter, which was hers, 9 years ago. And then just 6 months ago, as of today, my boyfriend Tyler passed away from fentanyl as well, POD'd in a rehab facility. Now I have reached out to police departments all around my area, and I know exactly who did it, but nobody's calling me back. I have written confession. Nobody's talking.
When you say who did it, you mean?
Sold him the drug.
Okay.
I have all of that, and I can't seem to get it.
Anthony. I'm not promising anything. I'm really sorry for your loss.
They don't treat overdoses as homicides, they're not investigating.
Let's try and see what we can do.
I
Okay.
just wanna clean my neighborhood I live in.
I don't want to make you any promises I can't keep. I really don't want to. But let's talk about it and see what we can do about this, because one of the other problems is how many of these stories get highlighted? Have I done a story on anybody in this room? There you go. That's an example right there. And I know the stories. I know the story Jonathan's done. I know the story that Andrew's done. But there are people who want to get these stories out there. Bring it to me. And I may say to you that this is for Jonathan. I may say for you, this is something that he's excellent at. So is a terrorist these days. That's what you might but no, but in all seriousness, I want to get your story out there. I want to get your story told.
Every time we take a look at that.
The problem with one of the problems with what you're saying is you're asking the same government to prosecute somebody that's doing something wrong with fentanyl. Government also funding people and watching them smoke fentanyl. So not much of a distinction. There's not really much you can go over here and say when we're actually funding programs that are allowing people to do it and observing them do it and saying that that's okay that they're doing it, and then prosecute somebody else for having it. So it sounds like you're saying you got to be in a government building to do fentanyl.
I'll take your question one second, but I want to give you one illustration of our media for a second here. 60 Minutes came to Seattle a few years ago to do a special on the homeless crisis. And they did everything they could to avoid saying drugs, alcohol. Every person they interviewed was a drug addict or an alcoholic. And they did their best to hide it and still came through the thing. They asked me to drive them around Seattle showing them the hot spots. And this was in 2019, I think it was, something like that. And I took them to the Starbucks building in downtown Seattle because Utah Avenue behind it had RVs and tents and had everything back there at the time. And we drove down the street, we interviewed people, we spoke to people, shattered every narrative. That footage is sitting in a CBS vault somewhere and has never seen the light of day. Anderson Cooper sat in my living room for 90 minutes interviewing me. Got these great pictures of me, Anderson Cooper, my wife, and my wife's so excited, like, what's Andy Coleman and Bravo? I'm so excited about this whole thing. 15 seconds of that made air. 15 seconds. And I have found that the people who come on my show, the people that Jonathan profiles, or the people that Andrea works with, or the people that Art works with, you don't have to become famous. You want to try and solve the problem. You want to try and get the words out there, right? You want to try and get the story to as many people as possible. If you go in that competition too, that's going to happen also, right? Because people want to tell your story here. And the people around here care about you and care about your story, even if they haven't met you yet. Most of the stories I cover are local. Okay?
Yeah, that's.
Thank you. In the back, I think there was a question.
Yeah, I just have a question. Would you be willing to have somebody on your show? Earlier this evening, you said to speak up and be heard, us as individuals. But as for myself, being a 3-time loser, nobody wants to hear from me. They tell me to keep my opinions to myself, or they don't, sometimes us convicts can't vote. Or
Well, Tim, you got to be using drugs.
Where money is going to help people such as myself, and nobody has answers. But when we do try to speak up, we're always shut down. And I think it would be a good opportunity, I'm just speaking for myself, if I was able to ask questions and get positive answers. Because not being able to get positive answers, sometimes it makes us ask ourselves, why try?
So I want to change things a little differently with you. I want you to come on my show and I want you to tell me all the things that didn't work. Why don't you tell me all the things that did work? Because the other day I was talking to a buddy of mine who's, let's just say, a pretty high up politician.
Have a seat, Tim.
Yeah, a pretty high up politician. And I said, it's funny because I'm in my glass booth all day. My producer's not even in the same room as me. I'm in my little bubble. And sometimes he goes, hey, you're actually listening to me. And then the phones light up or whatever, people are listening. But what my friend said to me was, he goes, Ari, I listen to your show like an hour and a half a day. And he says, you don't know who's listening to your show. Nielsen ratings for us are a disaster. They're archaic. There's no real way to actually know who's listening to the radio. But what happens is I get feedback on stories like yours, where somebody will message me and say, hey, can you put them in touch with me because I do X? It doesn't happen every time. But somebody reaches out and says, hey, can I do something like that? This guy I met because he saw me on Seattle is Dying, right? And I had nothing to do with the media back then. But he reached out because of that, and he's a bunch of other people who reached out because of it. So what I'm saying is, at the very least, you come on my show and you shame a few people.
I don't want to shame anybody, sir.
Not saying you have to shame a person.
Stand up for a second. Let me throw something at you, Tim. Okay, how long you been sober?
Just since July 15th.
Okay, so that's how many days?
42.
And what's your job right now?
I don't have a job yet.
No, what's your job in life right now? What's your number one priority?
Take care of myself
How?
by regaining my power.
How? Staying sober.
Yes.
All right, you stay sober. That's what you do. You see? That's what you got to do right now. To have a voice in this world, one, we give voices to people that aren't sober, which is a problem. You know, I made a real joke to Ari. He didn't really get it when I texted him. But I texted him last week and I said, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down to Seattle and we're going to do the ultimate in harm reduction. Because I think it's very harmful to be on the streets of Seattle, going to the bathroom, smoking fentanyl, living out there on those cold streets without a pistol. So what I want to do is I want to arm all fentanyl addicts on the street. So that I don't think
Do not come across the text.
because I don't. I said, all right, I'm going to bring a boot down and sign people up for weapons because I don't want my loved one down on the street smoking fentanyl, going to the bathroom, worry about getting knifed. I want him to be able to protect his property.
I gotta find my response to this.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what the hell do I
But
say?
see, that seems like a joke. That seems like a joke, but it's not. Because that's how far we're willing to take it. That's how far we're willing to protect people.
I wrote, I'm not sure you and I are gonna be on the same page about that. I didn't get he was joking at all. He went right like that.
But Tim, what I try to say is you have a job in life and all that's what your job is right now, to focus on yourself and stay sober. And there's too much right now in our society. We're listening to people talk about policy or to talk about things. And I'm sorry, you know, I want to say to everyone, you know, for me, I've been sober 13 years now. I'm finally starting to get a voice. But you know, because of my addiction, because of the things I did, because I treated the way I treated this society, I lost the right to have that voice. I didn't expect to do drugs and then get heard. I didn't expect that. I think that's a new thing that's coming around. People want to use drugs and still have rights. People want to use drugs and still, well, if that's true, we're going to put fentanyl addicts on juries. We're going to give them pistols. We're going to keep giving them rights. To me, I was clear. When I was committing crimes and using drugs, I wasn't good for society. And I'm sorry that people have to hear that, but it's not a good thing to be doing for society. What's good for society is your 43 days. You're making life better for people now. What you do now is put your head down, grow who you are responsibility-wise, be a bigger person, and soon you will have a voice, and soon people will listen to you because what you say will have merit, because you've told the truth for a long period of time. And that's the thing. That's what we're missing right now. We're saying everybody needs a voice. Everybody's got, no. There's people in recovery that have been doing it 13 years, 15 years, 20 years that aren't talking enough right now. And what we're hearing from is people that are shooting heroin saying they want safe injection sites. Of course you do. But that's not right. That doesn't make it right. And we have a bunch of people protecting those people. So to be honest, you know, we get a voice by doing the right thing long enough consistently, by having value in what we're doing. And I want you to earn that.
Fair enough.
I want you to earn it, Tim. I want you to earn it. I don't want people to give it to you. I want to say, when you got 6 months, then we'll put you on Ari's show. But prove it to us.
And when he says so, you come my direction.
Yeah. Parker Olson now's got how many years?
He'll have 2 years, November.
Parker got 2 years. He's helping a lot of other people. He's getting them employed. What he says has merit to this day now, and he's just bought his first house. And this is the kind of thing that we need to reward. And I do want to help you guys all. That's what I'm talking about here. When I talked about these guys not being able to get affordable housing, I was around here for years and they kept telling me there was an affordable housing crisis. This is 10 years ago. I was like, no, what are you talking about? There's no affordable housing crisis. And I was watching it because I had all this affordable housing. And I was like, people aren't calling me. Why don't they call for my affordable housing? They're not calling. And then recently, lo and behold, now, as I look at the people that are in recovery, there's an affordable housing crisis. Right now, these guys that are sober 1 year, they're sober 2 years, it is tough sledding to try to go out there and get a place to live, man. They make about $4 grand a month. They need to make 3 times the apartment value. The apartment's $2 grand a month. They're not making enough money to do it. And our government funding is going to people who behave poorly. The poorer you behave, the more money you can get from this state. And what these guys need here is we're doing something here to switch that funding to give these guys a hand up. When you're doing good, you've got a year sober, you can get some help, man, because you earned it. And you can get heard because you earned the right to get heard. But I never thought as a drug addict that I should have a bunch of rights while I'm using drugs. In fact, I thought the opposite. I thought, you know, people shouldn't count on me for anything. They shouldn't give me the right to vote or the right to do anything. I'm crazy right now. I'm actually smoking crack in a closet. Like, it's not the right thing to be doing. So, and we knew that.
Thank you for being here, Ari. I was doing some street outreach the other day and I was having a hard time reaching a couple. They go by Butterfly and Quick that were in Lower Queen Anne, actually right around the corner from your studio. And finally came up with, you're doing that fentanyl in front of me and you're making the cartels really rich. You probably hate rich people and you probably feel them down and out, right? And they're like, yeah. And I started going through my phone on all the mansions in Mexico owned by the cartel. And then I started thinking, how do we use our voice to kind of compare the anti-rich, anti-capitalist activists that are trying to tear down our community with their causes to point towards the capitalism in drug supply. They're outraged on every other form of capitalism except the capitalism that's killing. Now today, I believe, is now the #1 killer between the ages of 18 and 60 now, it was 45, are drugs. So how do you explain that there's no outrage and bridge shutting down and access to airports and dismantling and death threats towards all of us when the cartel are massacring our community and massacring human beings and our communities?
I hate to take this in a national direction, but I'm using it to illustrate a point. Did you know that Kamala Harris this week said she's in favor of building a border wall? The entire media said, yeah, okay, she's in favor of building a border wall. There's one thing people know about Donald Trump, aside from, millionaire or whatever it is.
He was crazy for thinking about all.
There you go.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris said it, and I saw like 1 or 2 outlets maybe calling out for it that weren't conservative. But it's really, you can tell any narrative you want, and it's a matter of convincing people effectively. Now, with that couple that you were talking to, that messaging works with them. It doesn't necessarily work with other people. I'm not saying lie and say what you have to say, but different people require different ways of reaching them. So when I used to run a youth organization, I used to bring in all different kinds of advisors from different backgrounds and things like that to work with the kids, because not every kid's going to respond to me. Not every person's going to respond to Art. Not every person's going to respond to me.
I'm kidding.
Whatever the case may be, I try and do that as effectively and tell the story as effectively as I can to the person I'm talking to. What message resonates with them? You want the key to my heart? Meat, cow. But what you're trying to say is you want to change an entire narrative based on one. And I'm not saying, the anti-capitalism thing can't work. But the problem is you're assuming that the people who are anti-capitalist are actually anti-capitalist. When I see the people who are bashing in windows downtown of the Nike store wearing Nike sneakers, when I see the people who are in Antifa and we've seen their backgrounds, right? This one's the child of this politician, and this one grew up with a privileged lifestyle, and we're against the establishment.
Yeah.
You grew up in the establishment, right? Changing the narrative that way, I would change the narrative instead is, why is nobody discussing the fact that fentanyl comes across the border? Why is nobody discussing that fentanyl comes from China? Why is nobody having that conversation at all? Why are we not discussing about why are they flooding our streets now? Why all of a sudden the last 3 years has this problem, which has been around for a while, exploded? Do you think that has anything to do with the open border? Now, mind you, we're not going to solve the border crisis right here in Seattle. But at the same time, and I'm not telling you to change people into conservatives or whatever the case may be, but nobody's connecting the dots from A to B to C to D. And what you got to do is spend a lot of time talking to people so you can tell the story. People say to me all the time who are Democrats, God, the city sucks. And I'll say, who'd you vote for in the last election? And they say, that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, oh, really? Who did you vote for in the last election? And I'll tear it apart. It's not a specific story. It's telling the story of what's happened. And if you want to make it the anti-capitalism message or the anti-Marxist message or the anti-whatever, how can you show what's going on? You're trying to change all people who are socialists to realizing that they're actually supporting capitalism in the worst possible way. You're back in the drug cartels. There's a free market. for the drug cartels and they're profiting off it. It's, can you make that point? You can make that point the way I just did, just like that. But at the same time, are you going to change the lunatic activists? They don't know what they stand for. You know this. The Antifa people who show up and go after the tents and stuff. Oh, it's compassionate to leave people out on the streets. No, it's not. So you're trying to have a conversation with people who are not true believers. I don't think most of these people are true believers. You know why? I've seen Tammy Morales, socialist in Seattle. I've seen her house. She's married to a doctor who makes $400,000 a year. I know where she lives, but she's a socialist. She also got all her money from Microsoft.
Okay,
Thank you. So I'm gonna ask a couple.
this is Lori. She's running for legislative district.
Oh, hi. Lori Tice, I'm running for state representative in the 32nd legislative district, which is up in North Seattle, Shoreline, parts of Montlake Terrace, and pretty much all of Linwood. So I'm gonna ask a question I think probably a lot of people are wondering. What individuals or organizations are profiting from this human misery? And what's the end game?
The end game is to make money. The end game is just, I want to keep making my 6-figure salary. Mark Jones, who was head of the King County Regional Homeless Authority, made a lot of money. And then when people said, hey, we want some results, just a smidgen of results, he quit. Couldn't take it and was out of here. And what does he care? He made a ton of money in the meantime. A ton of money. He was working from Ohio half the time. That he was in charge of our homeless crisis around here. The end game is money and power. It's always, you want to know who's behind all this? Follow the money every single time. You get any money from the city of Seattle?
No.
Okay. What usually happens to the organizations that do? Now, some people get grants, some people get contracts. I mean, like, look, Andrea gets some grants and gets contracts from people all the time. I'm not accusing Andrea of this kind of stuff because Andrea does a good job, because Andrea is a good person. Andrea holds herself accountable. You have the contracts you have with certain agencies that you have. But I look at some of these other groups and I go, so here's a perfect example, the bike lanes in Seattle. My son's friend goes, they spent $11 million a mile on the bike lanes. $11 million a mile. He goes, give me $400 and a can of paint, I'll do it for a mile for $400 and a can of paint. But these people are motivated by making more and more money. When I started filing public disclosure requests, I saw where all the stuff was going. And it's, how can this person profit off this? You want to know who Jay Inslee's working for? See who he gets a job with after he's out of office. See where he's going after he's out of office. You want to know who any of these guys are working for? See who they go work with when they're out of office. See who their top donors are right now. It'll give it away every single time. And Homeless Inc., see who's funding them the most amount of money. And when you see it's Seattle, you go, okay, who's profiting in Seattle? Who's funding all this kind of stuff all the time?
People like Frank Chop.
Whoever, you just go through all this kind of stuff, it's the same names every single time. Every single time. Yeah.
We got one more question. We're gonna close it up. Anyone got one more question? Here we go.
Just a little plug for your camera guy. What's this? He got like a panel. What's his association with you?
Which guy are we talking
Is
about?
it John or Chow?
Oh, Jonathan Show?
Yeah.
Jonathan Show.
That's not his camera guy.
He's not my camera guy. John, I wish I had the money for a camera guy.
Still guy.
I don't work for Homeless Inc. Jonathan Show is an independent journalist who can follow all his stuff on social media. And he goes anywhere that, were you at the border this week?
I lost track.
Not that border, that border.
Chicago.
He was in Chicago last week.
PNC.
At the Democratic National Convention. He's like, he's all over the place covering the stories that nobody else will touch. Here's an example. Did you see anything about the anti-Israel protests at the Democratic National Convention on CNN, MSNBC, or any other outlet? I saw them from him.
Yeah.
I saw them from him. He's an independent journalist. He came here tonight because he cares about this cause. So that's the guy for you guys to get to know. That's the guy for you guys to follow on social media. Jonathan Show, CHOE. Oh my God, I'm hyping him more than I'm hyping myself.
I've heard a lot about him, but I've never heard he's a liar. I've never heard anyone say what he's saying isn't true. So people like him, they don't like him to talk very much, and they don't like him, but also they don't say that he's saying things that aren't true.
My favorite story with the two people in the room who are sitting in front of me was Jonathan Show was checking out a homeless encampment one time and found a baby inside a homeless encampment with the mom. called Andrea. Andrea got them housing. That's real solutions. And that person had been visited by Homeless Inc. multiple times. And nobody ever said, hey, you got a baby in there, maybe we should do something
It's
about
like
this.
no bureaucracy, no red tape, right? So we do that together, Jonathan and I, a lot in the field. He's an outreach worker too. Everybody's an outreach worker. That's our mantra, right? Yeah, so Jonathan was talking earlier to these guys about having left mainstream media to be an independent journalist, and his coverage of this topic wouldn't bring in the advertisement revenue because it's controversial or people don't want to really hear the word fentanyl or overdose or encampment or border patrol issues. And so those mainstream outlets don't cover this very important topic because they can't get a ad revenue from Pepsi Cola or whatever, right? Is that essentially?
You can't sell, you know, diaper ads and Lipton tea next to somebody ODing on fentanyl.
Exactly.
You have to show those raw realities.
Exactly, but the Discovery Institute, who Jonathan works for, is a think tank that focuses a lot on homelessness. And they want to know the root causes of homelessness. And I think the smartest thing they ever did was hire him. Because who's done more to expose this kind of stuff? In just a couple of years, he hasn't been working for Coma. Very few people. And now you're going to check out his stuff and go, how did I not know about this guy sooner? Especially if you're on social media. You know, so I'm saying is that, once again, not working within the system, not working within the system, not working within the system. And look at the change they have made. I see what, 50 people in this room whose lives are changed because of 1, 2 people. Right? Right here.
In this one day.
That's just tonight. Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Thank you.
So guys, I think before we close, I just want to, you know, this is the purpose of what we're doing. I don't know if you got in 100-mile radius of anywhere around here, there was a more important conversation going on than this one. And to me, it's very serious. You know, this is what we're kind of dedicating our life to do. And all of you, what I want to make sure the mission is clear here, get the funding in this state to the right people and have it be effective funding if we do need funding to help with this problem, and understanding that we want good behavior rewarded and we want bad behavior held accountable. And we believe that if bad behavior is held accountable, it will improve. So if we can hold bad behavior accountable, it improves. And what we really want is outcomes. We want better outcomes. And we want people that are in charge of the money to show us your outcomes. You don't see, they don't, and that accountability is what we're trying to bring. And I really appreciate Jonathan coming here and helping us spread the message. And if you get a chance to talk to him after this and tell him some of your story or what your family has went through. And thank you, Ari. Thank you for coming here. It was an honor to have you here in this room. We're going to do a picture up with the rest of our hot seat guests. We're getting a pretty prolific kind of lineup happening here, but you know, thank you guys for being in this conversation, and thank you all for coming.
And I'll stick around if you have questions you don't want to ask in public.